Korea continues to flex its military muscle as South Korea believes there may have been technology transfer from Russia to the regime to advance the latter's missile technology. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Thursday, May 22nd here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we touch upon the latest acts of defiance by North Korea and the prospects of easing security concerns here on the Korean peninsula. For more on this, I have Thomas Maresca with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, as always, welcome back.
Thanks, great to be here.
I also have former Radio Free Asia reporter Cheon Soram with us. Soram, it's great to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Right, Thomas, we will start with you. So let's begin with news about North Korea's first live fire test of an air-to-air missile, which took place last week and has been fueling fresh concern here in South Korea. Do tell us more.
Yes, so North Korea media reported, kind of a range of air-based weapons tests, and the main thing that really stood out was the launch of a live fire test of an air-to-air missile with active radar guidance, which is something that is, beyond what we've seen from North Korea. I think the technology, even South Korea doesn't have an equivalent missile. Launched from its MiG-29 fighter jet, which is, an older Soviet plane. So, their Air Force is still not something that is kind of up to date. I mean, these are decades old things, but this is, a weapons technology that is, modern and certainly of some concern. And as you mentioned in the intro, there's speculation that this was developed with the help of technology assistance from Russia. The Joint Chiefs of Staff mentioned that they thought it was Russia helped the North, and this is in exchange for the troop deployments and weapons that North Korea has been sending to Russia for its war against Ukraine. I mean, the JCS mentioned they thought it would take a while for this to actually be deployed or really sort of combat operational, yet it is a source of concern, and I think particularly underscoring this, seeing some possible fruits of this military relationship with Russia, and how North Korea is still really keen on, developing its conventional forces. It's not just, its nuclear program. And so, we're seeing it across a variety of other, military areas.
Right. And also earlier on this Thursday morning, Thomas, North Korea, it fired several cruise missiles, and this followed an accident during a public military event that took place yesterday on Wednesday, during which Kim Jong-un was also present. Could you walk us through these events?
Yes, so the cruise missile launch, we don't know too much about it. I mean, the JCS also just sort of sent out a short message to reporters saying that South Korean military detected a launch of several cruise missiles into the East Sea this morning from the Sondok area of South Hanyong province. That's pretty much all we know about it. I mean, this is the first test since, they fired some short-range ballistic missiles earlier this month on May 8th. So, not a lot of information yet about that, but the warship accident that you mentioned, this was covered in North Korean state media. It happened yesterday, but they reported it today, where the launch of a new destroyer, a 5,000-ton warship, had an accident at this launch event where apparently just part of it, like the stern slid into the water first, and something, part of the hull got crushed, and it sounded like it sort of fell over to the side. And the South Korean military said that, they had kind of been monitoring the launch, and said that the ship seems like it, is still half submerged, floating in the water, but this is bad timing. Kim Jong-un was at this event, and he spoke afterwards, or he was quoted in the KCNA report, doesn't seem happy, called it a criminal act, said that a number of officials from the various agencies that were involved with the development of this ship would be facing consequences, and pretty much ordered the whole thing to get fixed by the time of their next, there's a plenary session of the Central Committee next month, and he wants it to all be fixed by then. And again, this is we don't know that much about this ship, but they launched another similar ship just a few weeks ago, and it seems around the same size. And actually, the South Korean military said they think it might be the same type, which also seems like it has some connections with Russian military assistance. Some of the missile and radar systems seem to look a lot like what Russia has. So this is another area where we're seeing possibly this military technology transfer.
Right, and against this backdrop, Soram Newsweek has renewed concerns about North Korea's missile threat against mainland America. Now, could you tell us a bit more about the concern that has been shared by pundits?
Yeah, last week North Korea carried out its first test of air-to-air missile, as Thomas mentioned about it. It's another clear sign that the regime is steadily expanding its military capabilities. Kim Jong-un was there to oversee the test, signaling its strategic importance. Now, some experts are raising concerns not just about this air-to-air test, but about the broader picture. What's causing real concern is North Korea's ICBM program, which could potentially travel over 9,000 miles, which is about more than 15,000 kilometers. That's enough to reach the US mainland within range. So what's more important is that experts believe North Korea is getting help from Russia. Some defense experts suggest that Pyongyang may be receiving Russian military technology, possibly in exchange for military support in Ukraine. Missile experts from South Korea pointed out that North Korea may have received secret technology from Russia. Secret technologies can be like an eye for the missile, so giving the missile the ability to detect and track enemy aircraft in real time. So these upgraded missile systems, including solid fuel boosters and potential multiple warheads capabilities, could pose a real challenge to existing US missile defenses. And this isn't just about the regional tension on the Korean peninsula. This is about a growing North Korea-Russia military partnership that could reshape the strategic balance far beyond Asia. Experts say this could be the beginning of broader push to modernize its air power and missile systems with help from Russia.
Right, and perhaps with these concerns in mind, US President Donald Trump recently shared a rather ambitious and costly plan to protect America from missile assaults. What exactly is this plan? And Thomas, what has been the response to it?
So, right, this was announced on Tuesday. Trump announced the details of what he's calling the Golden Dome missile defense system, similar to Israel's Iron Dome system, but it's golden. Trump loves everything gold, and it is, quite ambitious. It's they say, Trump and his, team says that will cost around $175 billion, and he wants to see it deployed by the end of his presidential term, 2029. And it's basically kind of a constellation of, ground, sea, and space-based, detectors and anti-missile defense systems. And kind of the headline there is that this would be something in space. This would be really the first time that the U.S. would be deploying weapons into space as part of this plan. And so, there are obviously supporters of it. The critics are arguing a number of things. I mean, it's still kind of in its early stages, but just the price tag. I mean, the Congressional Budget Office has run the numbers, and they said it could cost up to, I think it's over $800 billion, and could take 2 decades to be fully implemented. There's questions just even if it's feasible, or it really could, provide the type of defense, and whether we do need it or not. China has already sort of responded to it negatively, saying that you're risking kind of an arms race in space, and you're weaponizing space. So that's some concerns, and there's even concerns among some lawmakers in the U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren and some others are calling for an investigation just into how this might be, who's going to be doing the building of it, and this private contractors. Elon Musk's SpaceX has been tied to it, and he's obviously got connections with the Trump administration. So there are also concerns about that. So I think, there are certainly a ton of questions, and but of course Trump is saying, everything is great, it's going to work perfectly, but he kind of, that's his basic stance towards almost everything. So I think we'll just have to see when the numbers start coming in, when the money is actually starts needing to be spent. But that's, for now, that's the plan, the Golden Dome.
Right. And staying with Mr. Trump's security strategy, Soram, he has threatened airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities if a deal between Iran and the U.S. is not reached. Where do U.S. talks with Iran on the latter's nuclear ambitions stand?
So the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are now at a critical point. President Trump has issued a tough warning. If Iran doesn't agree to a new nuclear deal, the U.S. could launch airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites. It is a clear sign that tensions are rising and the time may be running out. Iran says they are willing to keep talking, but at the same time they are dismissing Trump's threat. Officials continue to insist the country's nuclear efforts are peaceful, and they are standing firm, saying they will not back down under pressure. Despite multiple rounds of indirect talks, big hurdles remain. The U.S. wants Iran to fully stop enriching uranium, something Iran calls an unreasonable demand. Iran's supreme leader has rejected that idea, calling it nonsense, and insisting Iran has the legal right to enrich uranium under international agreements. There is growing concern among observers that Iran's uranium enrichment is now very close to weapons-grade levels. While Iran maintains the program is for peaceful energy use, many in Washington remain deeply concerned about how quickly that could change. At the same time, Iran's economy is under serious situation. U.S. sanctions have severely impacted its economy, and the currency is falling, and the domestic unrest is growing. Iran wants those sanctions lifted, but it's not willing to accept the terms Washington is asking for. In summary, the path to a diplomatic resolution is full of challenges. Both sides are standing firm, and the chance for a peaceful deal is getting smaller. The international community is watching closely, hoping for a positive outcome to come.
Right. And Thomas, while Mr. Trump is opting for a tough stance against Iran's nuclear ambitions, he does not appear to be as aggressive with regard to North Korea. How do you explain this discrepancy, if you will?
Well, he really hasn't said much about North Korea to this point. It seems it just hasn't come up on the sort of agenda yet of, in this so far in his second term. I mean, the focus has obviously been on Russia, Ukraine, Gaza. Now he's doing this Middle Eastern swing. So, there just really hasn't been too much attention paid towards this region in general. I mean, China, the trade war stuff, but really on the Korean Peninsula. So, we don't have a great sense of what he's thinking in general, but what he has said a few times, he has touted his personal connection with Kim Jong-un, which, also dates back to his first go-around and the summits he had with Kim, and he often spoke about their kind of personal relationship. And a few times ahead of the election and after the election, he has said, I think he likes me. We get along. I think he wants to meet. He did say recently, I think a couple months ago, that there has been some communication. So I think we'll do something. So it's out there, and I guess the knowing Trump's sort of MO, there does seem to be this sense that he will try, when the attention does turn to North Korea, he will try again to have some kind of, he likes these top-down, leader-to-leader types of interactions anyway, and we saw that just in this Middle Eastern trip as well, sort of the way he dealt with sort of the Syrian leader, and just kind of, and also maybe there's some indications from this Middle Eastern trip, you can see these two sides of how maybe Trump approaches these types of negotiations, where on the one hand he is open to talking about discussions and negotiations, but will also, on the other hand, threaten, very strong reactions. And so maybe that's, somewhere North Korea will fall in the middle, where you get the sense he does want to have some kind of engagement with the North and with Kim Jong-un personally. But at the same time, Washington has also so far not really indicated any change in the approach and has called for denuclearization and hasn't stepped back on really the joint drills with South Korea. So there isn't really a signal that, things are changing right now with North Korea. With Trump, it's a different situation than the first time around with Kim, where North Korea is in a different position than it was the first time around. As Soram mentioned, Iran is kind of still on its way to enriching uranium, but we see North Korea already has a cache of nuclear weapons and a nuclear arsenal. And Trump has already called North Korea a nuclear power or nuclear state, which has caused some alarm here in South Korea. So I think it's, there was a report in Axios last month that Trump's national security team is kind of trying to prepare with this idea that, Trump may just at some point say, okay, now I want to engage with North Korea, and they want to have some plans in place. But how that shakes out is really anyone's guess still.
Right. Well, quite a number of scholars are saying that Mr. Trump right now is quite preoccupied with the situation in Ukraine amid Russian aggression. And that being said, Soram, the New York Times says President Trump has a new position on Russia's war in Ukraine. What is this new position? What are its broader implications, do you think?
After a 2-hour phone call with President Putin, President Trump announced that Russia and Ukraine will immediately begin negotiation towards a ceasefire. And he said, more importantly, the end to the war. But here's the key differences. Trump made it clear that the United States will not be a direct mediator in this talk. He believes only Russia and Ukraine know the real details needed to strike a deal. This hands-off approach is a sharp departure from the current U.S. policy, which has been centered around supporting Ukraine with military aid and pressuring Russia through sanctions. President Zelensky had been calling for even tougher sanctions on Russia, and U.S.-led diplomatic pressure. So Trump's decision to step back and not add the new sanctions has left Ukraine feeling isolated. And there's more. Trump also said that Russia wants to restart large-scale trade with the U.S. And once the war is over, and Trump was on board on that idea. He called it a tremendous opportunity to create jobs and boost the economy in both Russia and Ukraine during post-war rebuilding. But critics worry this could ease pressure on Putin, and European leaders are particularly uneasy about this situation. Some fear that without firm U.S. involvement, Russia could drag out the talks to buy time. In response, some European countries are considering additional sanctions to keep pressure on Russia. Experts warn that this change in the U.S. strategy could encourage Moscow and make it harder for Ukraine to negotiate from a position of strength, and possibly dragging out the war, not ending it.
Right. And Thomas, keeping in mind the Trump administration strategy with regard to Russia's aggression against Ukraine, do you suppose South Korea should be worried about a sudden shift in North Korea policy by the Trump administration?
Sure. I think all allies of the United States have already seen how changeable Trump's approaches can be almost day to day, and who he spoke to last. And, this is also something that we saw, the first time around. So, of course, you have to be concerned, and you have to try and plan for the various, possible contingencies. I think, for South Korea, it's the basic. Mostly, obviously, you want to keep as diplomatic channels open and make your own position known to Washington as much as possible. I think also with the upcoming presidential election, that's going to steer perhaps how South Korea wants to approach North Korea. Will you see the more, if, say, Lee Jae-myung wins, will you see a return towards more of a sense of wanting to engage with North Korea? Or if Kim Jong-un wins, will you see, a continuation of a more hardline stance? So, that will sort of determine some of it. But at the same time, obviously, South Korea needs to keep strengthening its own deterrence measures. You'd think it would want to keep ties with other allies in the region going strong. I think one of the big questions has been around South Korea nuclearizing, having its own nuclear weapons as a response. So these are questions that are going to have to sort of come up. And again, as North Korea's role, North Korea's capacity has changed in recent years, where now there are also some calls, among some experts to just think about dealing with North Korea from more of an arms control approach rather than a strictly sticking to a pure denuclearization strategy. And is that something that you could coordinate with Washington, or is that something that anyone would want here? And I guess maybe the last thing is this idea that the key to Trump's heart is something transactional. What can South Korea find some way to sweeten the deal or offer something to Trump to kind of keep him in the more aligned with Seoul's own goals, so I think, there's just going to be all sorts of questions going forward about this.
Right, and against these questions, as Thomas said, Soram, there was another report about analysts saying that Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Jue, is emerging as a likely successor. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
So there is growing talk about whether Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Jue, is being positioned as his potential successor. And this time it's tied to a diplomatic appearance. Since her first public appearance in 2022, Kim Jue has been regularly at a major military event or in domestic events. But her presence often sparked a debate. Is she the chosen successor or simply a symbolic figure? For years, there has been lots of speculation, but there has been no official confirmation from Pyongyang. But now the conversation is heating up again. That's because Kim Jue just appeared at what's believed to be her first official diplomatic event, joining her father at the Russian embassy in Pyongyang to mark the 80th anniversary of Russian Victory Day. It is fueling fresh debate over her status in North Korea leadership line. Experts say this public appearance on the diplomatic stage may signal that Kim Jong-un is preparing for her leadership, possibly grooming her as his eventual successor. It is also worth noting that North Korea's state media refer to her with unusually respectful language, calling her respected daughter. However, not everyone agrees that she is being groomed for succession, at least not yet. Some say she may be just too young, or that her growing presence is more about reinforcing Kim Jong-un's own image as a father of the nation, rather than signaling a real transfer of the power. So is Kim Jue really next in line? Right now, we just simply don't know about it. But one thing is clear, Kim Jue's appearance is rising. And at the very least, North Korea wants the world to start getting used to seeing her.
Right, which is why she's quite a lot in the media as well. She has been, though. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. As always, Soram, thank you very much for your insights today. And Thomas, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching.